All right, so learning the quadratic formula, I'm going to give you an example first that is factorable, just so that we can see what's happening. Okay, so this equation is factorable, so let's do that. So it is a simple trinomial. Multiplies to negative 12. 6 times 2. Got to get to a negative 4. So those are our answers. And what does it actually mean again? Right? This is what it is, right? It's the x-intercepts. So this is 6, 0, and this is negative 2, 0. They are the zeros, they are the x-intercepts, they are the roots. All these things mean the same thing, just on an equation, on a graph. Okay, when I look at this equation, do you remember which one is the A, the B, and the C? A is 1, right? Because you just have 1x squared. B is negative 4. And C is negative 12. Okay? Be careful of the order. It has nothing to do with the order it's written in. It's how many x squareds you have, how many x's you have, how many constant numbers you have. Okay? Okay, so here we go. The formula says to do opposite B. Opposite B. So positive 4 plus or minus the square root of B squared. What do you get when you square this number? 16. Positive or negative 16? Positive. Okay, actually that's the spot I get all the errors in on tests. Why do I get people doing errors? Because they try to write me this. That's an error. Why is that an error? Because it's not doing what I want it to do. So that is right. This is wrong. Okay, do you understand the difference in that? I'm teaching my grade 9s now. What does this actually mean in math? Well, this means to do negative 4 repeated, negative 4. That's what I want. What does this mean? This means to do negative 1 times 4 repeated, not negative 4 repeated. Okay, so we're not going to make that mistake. We're done with that idea, right? Square. This is always positive, no matter what, so you don't even have to think about it. Subtract 4 times A times C. B squared minus 4 times A times C. Good? All of that divided by 2 times A. Okay, calculator time. So can you type this in? Just this stuff under the square root. Just go, what is 16? Subtract 4 times 1 times negative 12. So just that part. I just want this part. Subtract 4 times 1 times negative 12 equals 64. Okay. Now, this is how we're going to type it in. Remember when we did the cosine law, we talked about all top divided by all bottom with brackets. So I'm going to do it like this. All of this top divided by 2. So I have brackets around that to say top. And I'm going to type it exactly like that with that root. And I got 6. And that's cool because it matches what we did over here, right? Okay, but I'm not done. This says plus or minus, so I have to do another round. So on this round, I'm going to change this sign. So on the first time we added there, and then on the second time we subtracted. So brackets, divide by 2. Can you try typing that? And I'm going to make a prediction. Is it -2? Did it match? Okay, so I would never pick this over factoring because for me factoring is faster. Okay, but what are we going to use the formula for? We're going to be using it for things that we can't factor. Okay, so let's check this out here. So pretend I saw this on a test and I was like, okay, I got to solve this. I am going to try to solve it with factoring and see what happens. So this is a complex. So if I did a full number, which is -14, and then I talked about 14 being either a 114 or a 27, I need to get a pair that will produce 6. Will 1 and 14 ever be able to add to 6 somehow? No. 2 and 7, can I ever make a 6 out of that? No. So what would that tell me? You can't factor this one. It's not factorable because we can't find our partners. Okay? So I have to use the formula for this one. Okay, so here's our values. 2 is the A, 6 is the B, and -7 is the C value. So x equals -6 plus minus the square root of what is that B value squared? I'm going to do that. I'm not going to write 6 squared. I'm just going to do that. What is 6 squared? 36. And then subtract 4 times 2 times -7. All over 2 times 2. Okay, so on the next step, I'm going to put this bottom as a 4, right? That's okay. I'm just going to do this square root part. So I'm going to say, what is 36 subtract 4 times 2 times -7? That's all I'm doing. 36 subtract 4 times 2 times -7, 92. Okay, this is another reason why this isn't factorable. Can you square root 92 nicely? No, it's So that also tells me this is not a nice one. Over here, we had the square root of 64. That's a nice number, so that means that that problem was actually factorable. Okay, so what are we doing in our calculator? Okay, you don't have to write this. You don't have to write it on your paper. I'm just showing you, this is me in my calculator. This is exactly what my calculator looks like. -6 plus root 92, brackets, right? Divide by 4. Okay, so you have to repeat it twice. Once there was an add and once there was a subtract. And then can you peek at the bottom? Because I think I put the answers on your paper, did I? You have little answers down there? Did you get x to be 0.9? Okay, did you get 0.9 and -3.9? Because on the bottom, it says 2 times 2. That's why. Yeah, the last time it was just by 2 because that a value was just a 1 last time. Yeah, it's not always a 2. It'll change whatever your value is there. Okay, number 2. You cannot start this question. Why can't you start it? Has to equal 0, and that's not happening. So you need to shuffle stuff around. Which way do you want to move? I kind of like keeping my boss positive, my x squared positive. So make sure you move properly. So now I have a negative on the 8 and a positive on the 9 because I moved it. Okay, so A is how many x squareds? 1, -8, and 9. Those are your values you're plugging in. Okay, so here's what mine looks like. +8 plus minus the square root of 64, subtract 4 times 1 times 9 over 2 times 1. Okay, are we getting a 28 in that square root part? That square root part is going to be called the discriminant, and we're going to talk about it soon. So the discriminant is 28. Is my answer going to be decimals at the end? Yes, because I can't square root 28 nicely, so this is all going to be a decimal answer. And I'm going to let you peek at the bottom when you're done. Are your answers matching? Okay, the third example, I am trying to be tricky. Why am I trying to be tricky on this one? The order, yeah, the A is actually the end one. So I want you to really focus on, okay, well, what are my A numbers, B numbers, and C numbers? So what is my A number? It's actually -3. Because again, it's not the order, it's how many of the x squareds do you have? How many x's? How many numbers? Okay, so I'm discriminating. The discriminant under the root is 25, subtract 4 times a -3 times a 6. Did you get 97? Okay, try your calculator. Okay, so again, this is what my calculator looks like. I got those brackets. I got negative values where I need them. Some people have brackety calculators, so if you have a brackety calculator, yours will have a bracket in front and behind the 97, an extra bracket set. Do you know what I mean? My other calculator that I have is a brackety one. So here's what it would look like if you have a brackety calculator. Some of you have extra brackets on the 97, right? Does anybody have a brackety calculator? Somebody does? Yeah. So now you know, right? You always have an extra bracket than the rest of us. Okay, so there's my calculator, but this is also somebody that has a brackety calculator. Okay, did your answers match the bottom? Got those ones? Okay, the last one here. We got things good here. We have a 0, that's good. We have ABC. We don't have any tricks with the order. So this one is just that the numbers are decimal numbers. So go ahead. X equals positive 6.2 plus minus the square root of. I'm actually going to do 6.2 squared minus 4 times 1.5 times 1.1. Does anybody know why I didn't bother writing that negative 6.2? B squared, I didn't write that negative in there at all. Okay, does it matter? No. I don't need a negative in there because I know my answer is going to be positive anyway, so I may as well not even bother making mistakes, right? Did you get a 31.84, anybody? Yep, okay. If there's anybody who's having problems with your calculator steps, figuring out how to get those answers, please flag me down today and we can go through what you're typing if it's not coming out and working for you. Okay, so we have talked about this stuff already. We knew that there's 3 outcomes for a quadratic. A parabola could cross twice. There's also a scenario where it might only hit the x-axis exactly one time. There could be a scenario as well, though, that it doesn't cross at all. Okay, so how can I tell with this formula? So when we're using this formula, we really rely on this square root part to tell us stuff. Okay, so the name for that is called the discriminant. So the discriminant is just this square root part. Okay, if it is above 0, another word for above 0 is positive. So if it is positive, there's going to be 2 answers. So kind of an example, if I had this 16, and then if I added a root 16 and I subtracted a root 16 separately, that would produce 2 things. This time, if it is equal to 0, so here's an example. What if I had a number and I added the root of 0 to it or subtracted the root of 0 to it? Did that do 2 different things? No. You're not going to get anything different if you add 0 or subtract 0. That's going to be just one answer. And then the other one, so this time, what if the discriminant is below 0, aka negative? And then here's an example. So what if I would have negative 10 under there? You can't do that. Calculator gives you an error understanding you can't ever times to be negative, right? Not the same thing. So then this has no answers to it. How many solutions are there going to be? So here we go. I don't want the whole formula. I actually just want that little part of the formula, just the discriminant square root part. So here I go. B squared, I'm going to write 144. Positive, always positive. Subtract 4 times 5 times negative 3. I got 204. So how many x-intercepts would we end up with if this is the root part? You're going to get 2 x-intercepts out of it. All I'm looking at is that it was positive. 204 is bigger than 0. Positive. Okay, number 2. B squared, so 100. Minus 4 times 5 times 16. So I got a negative 220 out of that. That's good. So what does that tell me? Because in the equation, what would happen if I tried to square root that? You're not going to be able to do that, and then there would be no x-intercepts. Okay, and that's fine, because parabolas can 100% look like that. Okay, the last one. 100 is the b squared minus 4 times 5 times 5 equals 0. So that means there are going to be, there's going to just be one x-intercept exactly once. Okay, solve these equations. So this is this one right here. So x equals negative b, so positive 12, plus or minus the square root of 204. We've already done that, by the way, so just write that down. The square root of 204 divided by 2 times 5. Okay, so here's this parabola. I graphed it, I'm cheating. And it has two x-intercepts. So I'm going to calculate, it's called a 0, that's one of the names for it. Did you get negative 0.23 as one of your answers? Okay, so over here, this is going to be 2 point something. So it's between that and that. So I'm getting 2.63. Is that one of your other answers? Okay, this is what my applieds do. You do the same thing, but you just make your calculator do it. Okay, here we go on the next one. X equals negative b, so negative 10, plus or minus the square root of 0. Right, we already did this one. This is this guy. Over 2 times 5. Okay, so would you be okay if I just did this? Does that make sense? I don't need that in math. I don't need to add the square root of 0. I don't need to subtract the square root of 0. It's doing nothing to my value. So you can do this in your head. What is negative 10 on the top divided by 10? Negative 1. Here's my graph. There's my x-intercept. I only have it one time at negative 1. That's it. Okay, I have 2 questions left, and then we're done. Okay, how do you, in math, how do you make one answer? What's the scenario that makes that one answer? If, what was it again? If that discriminant was exactly 0. If the discriminant is exactly 0. Okay, so b squared, that can become 144. Subtract 4 times the 4 times, I don't know what that is, so it's just going to be a k. That's what it says. It's just the number and k. Okay, this is math, algebra. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this term look a little better. What could I do to that term? I could change it to that, right? 16, because I could do the 4 and 4 together now. Then I would want to, what do you want to do? What do you want to move to the other side? We're going to isolate something. So do you want to move the 144 or the 16? Doesn't matter. 16k. Move and divide. All right, last question. Got a 9 out of that? Sorry if you didn't see, a 9. How do I know if a quadratic will have 2 x-intercepts on it? If the discriminant is positive. If the discriminant is positive, then it would be 2 answers. Okay, so here I go. B squared is 144, positive, minus 4 times 3 times k. I'm going to make this term look better. Okay, I'm going to do this a specific way because I want to touch base on an inequality rule because I'm not sure if you've learned it or you learned it and probably forgot it. Okay, I'm going to minus the 144 over to the other side. And then I'm going to divide. Here's something crazy with inequalities. Did you know that if you ever do a multiplier divide by a negative value, it flip-flops? Yay, nay. Have we ever learned that rule? Inequalities somewhere? So with your algebra, if you ever have to do a division or a multiplication by a negative, it makes that sign flip over.